It's actually an honor to talk to someone as big and knowledgeable as Devina Mehra, and I'm lucky and very glad to be hosting you today, ma'am. Uh, we'll talk about a lot of stock picking strategies we'll learn from ma'am today, and we all know that a lot of us are trying to dip our feet into equities. There is a lot more demat accounts and mutual fund folio registrations, etc. So somewhere, at least some people have seen the merit in investing in equities. Of course, there are a lot of short-term investors which we do not always advise. Um, so, but the thing that most of us would want to know now that we are into equities is how to pick that stock that is really, that is really going to give you that kind of success that a lot of these big people have, or how to pick the right stock. And I'll tell you that's the most challenging. So Devina Mehra, who's an expert stock picker herself, will today shed light on the strategies that may guide you on the road to stock investments and make it easier for you to kind of go through the market and make the right choices. So welcome so much, Devina. And I would start with what I was talking about. Everybody wants to be kind of successful in stock investing, right? And they have this expectation that there'll be a lot of money and stuff like that. So could you tell us a story, something that is an inspiring story about picking the right stock and then seeing it becoming successful in your long career?
Thanks, Nidhi, for a very kind introduction. And while I will be answering your question on stock picking, I will also like to explain why the stock picking, the way people understand it, is not what you should be totally focusing on. I mean, I'll come to that later, but first the stories. So I'll talk about the two most well-known stories in First Global's history of 30 years in terms of the stock picks. And one was HDFC Bank, which the report is now, 29 years old. So it's 1996 report, which people still remember. And what did it have on the cover? It had a baby, because this was 1 year after HDFC Bank went public. So at the price of 38 rupees, which split adjusted is 3.8 rupees. So it had a baby on the cover saying this is what it is now. And it had Arnold Schwarzenegger, who was the then reigning Mr. Universe, that this is what it will be, that it will be this big bodybuilder from a baby. And the reasons, of course, were simple. One was, of course, at that time, nearly all the market share in the markets were with the PSU banks. So here you had a good private bank coming up. So obviously it would take away some market share. Plus it had the advantage of the brand of HDFC, which was already an established brand. So all of those things were there. But as I say, there was also an X factor, because many banks, people remember the successful stock stories, which is HDFC Bank and Kotak Mahindra. They forget that there were many other banks which came and went, from Times Bank, Global Trust Bank, Centurion Bank, and so many others. Yes Bank went through such a turmoil. So I also say there was an X factor, because a lot of the HDFC Bank people were my ex-colleagues from Citibank, so I knew them personally. So I also took a bet on the management, because in banks, that's very important. The other very famous call, which everyone remembers, is Amazon, which was just after the tech crash. So in the first quarter of 2001, we had a strong buy on Amazon at $15, which is equivalent of 75 cents now. And at that time, no other firm on Wall Street, we've been global for 25 years, so, but no other firm had even a buy on it. Everybody had a sell. And that was purely a numbers call, because in the last quarter of 2000, Amazon for the first time made substantial cash flows. So cash flows is something to focus on. So that's why that's why we made that call. Even Jeff Bezos sent us an email saying thanks for the support because ours was the only buy on the street. So those are the good stories, but I will come to why one should not just stick to these kind of stories.
So you talked about these interesting stories and certain strategies that you may have followed at that time.
Right.
Have those strategies undergone a change over the 3 decades, more than 3 decades that you've been doing this?
Yes, your methodology always evolves because remember 3 decades ago when I started First Global back in end of 93, securities research did not exist in India. So much so that in my MBA at IIM Ahmedabad, we didn't even have a course on securities research because that career did not exist. So obviously it's been an evolution over time. But what I have done is I have always stuck to first principles to really understanding from first principles. So one of the things, for example, at that time, people used to focus mostly on, and even now, on the income statement, that this happened to the sales growth, this happened to margin, this happened to profit growth. But hardly anyone focused on, for example, return on capital employed, return on equity, or cash flows. And those were things where you have to really focus because many times, for example, if there is a problem with the company, they also know everyone looks at the income statement. So they will try to manage the sales and profits, maybe sell some goods on credit. So you might see the pressure on receivables first. You will see a pressure on cash flows. So those things evolved over a period of time. Then you also realize that sometimes you get the call right that you want to buy something, but it falls more before it bottoms out, or something looks very expensive, but it might still continue to run for a while. So some amount of other systems to add on to the fundamentals also evolved over time. So yes, it evolves over a period of time.
So, a lot of things that you do mention, of course, they're very, very important, but very few retail investors might actually understand them. So, do you have kind of a, not exactly a thumb rule, like 2, 3 points that are easier for them to check, review, and understand when they are choosing a stock?
Okay, I would say that everybody tells you how to buy a stock. But whether it is some course you are doing, whether it's a fund manager, how many people focus on when to sell a stock or on risk management? So those are the things where real value can be added. And I would say that if this is not your full-time job, then the broad things you have to get right. Number one is asset allocation. Asset allocation. And also there I say that just as in Google Maps, you don't just put the destination, you have to put the starting point. So look at where your assets are currently and what, asset allocation sounds like a fancy word if you're not from the world of finance, but it is fairly simple. The categories of assets. So it's equity, for example. Equity means both what you hold directly as well as through mutual funds. Then there is fixed income, where you have the fixed deposits, you have all these tax saving schemes you might have put money in, you might have fixed income mutual funds. Then there is gold, there's real estate, land, building, flat, house, whatever. Maybe you have something else also, maybe crypto or art. So look at first everything all together and then see that are you where you want to be or do you need to make some changes? So get the asset allocation right. And one leg of asset allocation which Indians often miss out on, that India is not the world. I mean, if you look at equities, India is less than 5% of the market cap of the world. There's no reason why 100% or 90% of your assets should be in India. So please look at global diversification and remember that the US is not the globe either. So if you look at India and just think buying a NASDAQ ETF will get you global diversification, that is not it either. I mean, this is the world is a big place and this is a cause for me personally. And because of that, like in First Global, we have a global product that starts at $10,000, which at, the rates have dropped so much that it is now 8.7 lakh rupees, but still a very low start compared to where you will not get a product like that for less than $1 million. And why global diversification? Let me just give you one statistic. When I started working, the dollar was 12 rupees. There's been a 87% depreciation in the course of less than a career. So you cannot make a 10, 20, 30-year plan or look at your financial goals and forget about global diversification. So that's very important. So broadly, if you get these things right, it doesn't matter so much that you have to get the exact best performing stocks right.
Right. Another thing, while we are talking about investing, is passive funds have, are becoming very popular, like index-related funds. So how does that work in the stock markets? And what I mean to ask is that i- is something like that, could people replicate it in their own portfolios by buying only stocks that are in the index? And what could be the pros and cons?
I don't think you should go and buy stocks which are in the index. That doesn't make much sense. And also any stories, and we started with a story of these successful stock picks. I mean, look at how the indexes have changed over the years. So let us say, if you look at the original Sensex, for example, what did you have there? You had, in terms of industries, textile, paper, shipping, in terms of groups, or for that matter, Premier Automobiles, Hindustan Motors. And in terms of groups, you had Mafatlal and JK and Thapars. All of them have become irrelevant in history. And those were the blue chips of the day. Don't forget, I mean, in hindsight, you can say that, oh, everybody knew they weren't going to do well. No, I mean, these were all companies with decades-long history. In the original Sensex, there's only one company with a shorter history, which was Indian Hotels. All the others were very old companies, very established companies, and the blue chips of the day. So that is, and if you look at, again, over the time, how Sensex and Nifty have evolved, at one point, there were so many PSUs in the index. There was BHEL, MTNL, VSNL, IOC, BPCL, HPCL, I can go on. And then there came a time when everybody forgot that PSUs existed. You look at 25 years ago, there was not one single financial stock in the Sensex or Nifty for that matter. And now that's the largest weight. That's how much things change. So looking in hindsight, you look at the success stories in everything. This is called a survivorship bias. You're looking at only the successes. You're looking at only the survivors. But if you look at real time, and I have done this for people, sometimes people come that my father or mother has not looked at their portfolio for 20 years or 30 years. And when you open it, this is what you find. Or even worse, I mean, this is an actual story. This is a distributor who came with his mother's portfolio. And you looked at it, and there were what? DSQ Software, Pentamedia, NEPC, Micron, all the hot stocks of the tech boom of 99, 2000. So things change. So this is indexes. And even if you are investing in a passive index now, even if it's a fund, now like in terms of passive sounds as if it is lower risk. But actually, what does passive mean? It means that if the market falls 30%, that index will also fall 30% and probably little more, because the funds do not track the index exactly. There is what is called a tracking error. So there is some amount of underperformance relative to the index most of the time. And then there is this thing that what is the active fund manager really doing? And to my mind, the biggest plus of an active fund manager or an advisor is to limit your downside risk. Risk management is the main value add in active investing. And if you look at the best performing mutual funds, for instance, the best performing ones are the ones that outperform during downturns. I was looking at, there was a study done by Economic Times, which they were surprised at. I was not surprised at the results, that this was the case. And there was a scheme which outperformed in 93% of the upturns, but it was among the bottom 5 schemes. Because investing is a loser's game. You win if you don't lose. So your first priority should be not to take a big hit on your capital. And for that, you have to take the small hits on your capital. So always have a stop loss. I say the best thing you can do for your portfolio is when you invest, tell yourself, I may be making a mistake, because a reasonable percentage of your picks are not going to do what you thought they would do, however well you choose them. That's why I'm saying stock picking when I talk about, it's a limited thing because there is nobody who knows in advance which is going to be a multi-bagger. I cannot say in 1996 I knew this would be HDFC Bank's trajectory or Amazon's trajectory. At best, when you are picking a stock, at best you can say it will double or triple. Beyond that, no one has the vision. So always buy a portfolio of stocks. Always buy at least 25, 30 stocks as per your system, as per some system. And out of that 25, 30 stocks, still 5, 7 stocks are going to be duds, where you will need to get out. Some will give you reasonable returns. And then if you have picked them well, and then your luck also favors you, maybe you will get 2 or 3 multi-baggers out of that. But no investor, no fund manager in history has this crystal ball that which is going to be this multi-bagger over multi-years. Anyone who's telling you that is misleading you, because not Warren Buffett, not Rakesh Jhunjhunwala, nobody knows. I mean, in 70 years of investing, Warren Buffett says, there are only about a dozen decisions that have accounted for my performance. He sells 85% of what he buys within 2 years, the majority within 6 months. Rakesh, if you met him over the years, talked about so many stocks. He did not know in advance that all his money would be made in Titan, Crisil, and Lupin, nobody knows that. So don't kid yourself that you have this magic formula that you will pick up only the multi-baggers. So always diversify.
So just going back to that Amazon and HDFC story, so just as an aside, do you still own the stocks?
Not really. Amazon I held for a longer period. HDFC Bank, got out a reasonable time ago.
Okay. You also mentioned one of the biases while you were talking about the passive strategy and how it might not always work. Is there any other kind of bias that you think can really hold you back when it comes to stock picking?
Oh, there are many, many. So I have talked about quite a few in this book, because that's like one of my favorite topics. I always say that I can teach a whole business school course on biases, because basically, I mean, the basic principle why biases are there and why they are so hard to get rid of is that they are hard-coded within you through human evolution. So as I always say, your brain is not concerned about the health of your portfolio. The brain is only wants 2 things, survival and procreation. And many times those are at odds with what you should be doing for your portfolio. So for example, there is always a FOMO feeling. Arey, mere friend ne wo PSU mein paisa bana liya, defense mein bana liya, so I have to get in. And that's the psychology behind a lot of thematic funds that are launched. All the NFOs are based on this psychology. But why do we have this? And why do we, for example, want to buy a Gucci bag or a Tumi computer bag or something? The core of that is that you want to belong to a tribe. Because when we were living in caves, if you got out of the tribe, you definitely could not procreate and you might not survive. So our ancestors were people who have chosen to stay on in the tribe. So, that's the reason why we want to be where everybody else is. We don't want to think for ourselves. So this is one. Then there is loss aversion, that we know the stock has gone down, but we hate actually booking the loss. This is something. So that is why I'm saying always have a system. Don't think market girega tab sochenge kya karna hai. When you enter a stock, as I said, tell yourself, I may be making a mistake, put a stop loss. So this is another one. Storification, Human beings, one thing which is common across all human beings, all civilizations, from the most sophisticated to the most primitive, across geography, is stories. We remember stories, we teach through stories, we are storytellers and listeners. So that is why I say look at data. And for a lot of fund managers have very creative stories about why they, how they buy a stock, why they are holding a particular stock. And the problem with stories is that over a period of time, you tell it enough times, you also start to believe it. So if you look at Warren Buffett, for instance, his most famous call is Coke. I mean, I'm just using him as an example because he's well known, not that he's the worst example or anything like that. That Coke, that is this great brand, great cash flows. But because he kept telling that story, he didn't sell that stock. For 30 years, that stock was a huge underperformer relative to the index and relative to Pepsi. So last I looked, in 30 years, it had gone up 12 times, the S&P had gone up 18 times, and Pepsi, I think, had gone up 24 or 25 times. So that's the stories keep you captive. The market is not a person, so it has no interest in how carefully you have crafted your stories. So only one thing matters, which is numbers and data. So even stories about the management is good or brand is good, where does it come through in the numbers is one of the things which I always talk about. So I mean, biases there's a very long list, but the point is that Daniel Kahneman, who won a Nobel Prize for his work on biases, who worked on biases for nearly 70 years, he died at the age of 90 last year. He said, in spite of all that I have done, I find that my decision making has not really changed because these things are so hardwired. That is why now we use a system, we use an AI ML system, because that's the only way to really get rid of biases. And biases is one thing which is systematic, but there are also something called noise. So if I have like 15 people with 20 years experience in the market and I give them the exact same data on the same company, they will have different views on it. So that is random noise. You know that the day you have a fight with your spouse in the morning or in the traffic, you are in a different mood. You will look at the same things differently once you reach work. So human beings are like that. I mean, Daniel Kahneman, for example, he talks about the book he had written, and he said that I and my co-author thought that we will finish the book in 6 months. Whereas we should have asked the publisher that a non-fiction book of this length with 2 authors, how long does it typically take? And they would have told us 2 years. It actually took us 3 years because, that thing that as human beings, we do not think in probabilities, we do not think in statistics. He said, even I myself, who's been doing this work, and I'm writing the book on biases, this bias still remained in my whole thought process.
So your own book, Money, Myths and Mantras, which is the
Right.
new book on the block, and in fact, I should tell the audience that there will be a book signing session also with David outside this auditorium. What are the main takeaways from here? Am I correct in assuming that the myths is the part where you're talking about biases?
Yeah, so it is also that there are a lot of things which are taken for granted in the markets, which you'll see a lot of people talking about as mantras, but they're really myths. For example, invest in your circle of competence. Now, what does it mean? Invest in your circle of competence, if I say it in plain words, it means invest in your comfort zone. So if your fund manager only understands, let us say, FMCG, fast-moving consumer goods, and banks, and invest only there, what are they going to do when the theme in the market changes, let us say, to commodities or something else? So why should you be captive to someone's so-called circle of competence? So those are the things I have held up to light, that what actually holds, should you follow well-known investors who supposedly have found success? Is that even the right question to ask? So, and also, of course, I have also started, because as I say that to break the rules, you have to know the rules. So what are cash flows? What determines the PE of a stock? Why is it that within the same industry, something trades at 10 times PE, something trades at 30 times PE, something trades at 40? So why the difference? What are the real drivers? So it is actually a distillation of 30 years of what I have learned. And I have tested everything. I have not taken anything from granted, whether it appeared in a textbook or said by a professor or anything. So I have tested it. And for me, the thrill in this whole journey has been the learning. And this is an attempt to share that learning. And I think it comes out of my genes, because my parents have been both academics. So that, that urge to teach is strong. So this is really that. So, but I mean, I met a content writer recently, and she was telling me that most books these days are by well-known people are ghostwritten, and I said, wow, I didn't know that. I mean, so like this is really what, and I've tried not to pad it up at all because I am a big reader, and as a reader, I hate non-fiction where a few ideas are just stretched out to a book length. So this is not that either. So that's why it's been difficult for me to answer questions that one takeaway or one this thing, because this is not like that.
Yeah, so by the way, this book is by a book buff. Devina reads like how many 40 you read last year?
53 last year.
53. So that is that kind of count kind of goes year on year, and then this year she also wrote for us about the excerpts of the main books that she liked. So the last question to you, Devina, is which everyone would be really interested in. Which are the sectors to really look out for in 2025?
Okay, so I mean the themes change, which is one thing which I was talking about, that in markets no theme lasts forever, no geography, no asset class, or the same sector within the country. So we look at everything in our PMS, or for that matter our global funds, from base zero every quarter. So I can tell you where we are overweight today. It may or may not hold for the whole year. So as of now, we are overweight, where we've been actually overweight for a while has been pharma, IT, auto components. So these are where we would be still overweight. FMCG, maybe now we are a little overweight. Capital goods and industrial machinery, interestingly, most people started talking about it only in 2023. We actually went overweight because of our systems, because they signaled it back in October 21. So we were overweight for 3 years. We went little underweight in October again because the prices have fallen. We bought some of them again. So that would be broadly where we are today.